Welcome back to Stack Hunters. I'm Bradley Stalder here with my co-host Dan Williamson. Dan, it's been 4 weeks, well, entering week 4 of the NFL season. Stack Hunters is mostly a best ball podcast, but we thought it would be important for the viewers, listeners, to get an update of some of the biggest winners and losers entering week 4, especially from a best ball perspective. Uh, One of the things to keep in mind, and I want to include injuries in winners and losers perspectives because those are affecting our teams. We can't reap the benefits of starting these players. We can't, go to the waiver wire and replace them. There's no replacement value except for what you drafted. So, especially early players, like we're going to ding them as losers. So, those are things to keep in mind as we're talking about some of the biggest winners versus ADP, some of the biggest losers versus ADP. But Dan, any big takeaways before we get into individual players that we'll look at through the first 3 weeks?
Yeah, I think a couple big takeaways are pretty obvious. One is that elite tight end seems to have mostly fallen flat on its face so far. There's still a long season, so things may straighten around for at least some of the guys. And of course, with the tight ends, I don't think anybody was going, okay, well, we're selecting 6, 7, whatever you want to call the elite range, and all these guys are going to hit. That's not a reasonable expectation, but that two, well, at least two, hopefully 3, 4, 5 of them hit. That I think was a reasonable expectation, but we're just not there yet. So that's definitely one thing. And as you mentioned, just the injuries seem to be hitting disproportionately hard at the top of the draft board.
Yeah, especially to our elite tight ends. You see Engram going out, Mark Andrews still dealing with whatever he's dealing with, the limited snaps. You have Trey McBride who's dealing with a concussion. You have these elite tight ends that now it's looking like what are the middle pack tight ends going to offer? We just saw Cole Kmet go off for a massive game. Your ever dreaded Dallas Goedert had his career game. So, if y'all remember, I had to talk Dan into drafting Dallas Goedert for one of our best ball leagues together. And, we understand why that was risky, but with, again, injuries to the top of the draft board, players like Dallas Goedert are being leaned on more heavily by their offenses. So let's get into it for the best ball winners through the first 3 weeks, and then we'll talk about some of the losers. But before we do that, we're going to get a bumper in right now. I am not good at taking a break for a long time and then just being like, okay, we're back at it. We're back at it. But we are back at it. Dan, you co-host the Fantasy Empire every week now that we're in season, and I'm hosting Man versus Machine along with Ryan Reynolds. Before actually we get into some of the winners, are there any takeaways from that show? Any promos that you want to make about Fantasy Empire?
Yeah, number one is I'm learning how much fun it is to sit in your seat where you're actually responsible for all the bumpers and the music in the in and the out, and frantically hitting the right buttons and all that kind of stuff. So it's been a learning experience, but I think I'm getting better. But it's a fun show. Fantasy Empire, basically, it's myself, Nelson Sousa, Chris Vaccaro, and Matt Modica, and the four of us. These guys are all just like legends in the high stakes world, and the four of us are just kind of going through and talking our way through the week's action, what we expect for the next week. Even though it's labeled as a high stakes podcast, it's really for anybody who likes to win their leagues. So the appeal is much broader than that. We do talk about contest leagues and all that, but we also talk about standalone leagues, and basically 95% of everything you're going to hear on that is applicable anywhere in the fantasy football world for managed leagues.
And what days are is Fantasy Empire hitting? Days and times for the people at home.
Yes. So Tuesday, 11 o'clock Eastern and that's daytime, not nighttime. That's AM, not PM. Is when we go. So it's a great day to take an early lunch and sit down. We're kind of a long form podcast. We generally go about an hour and a half to make sure that we can cover everything we want to get to. But it's a fun time. It definitely goes fast for us as hosts. It's hard to believe when an hour and a half is up, and hopefully just as quickly for our viewers and listeners.
Thank you, Dan. Look, make sure you guys are checking out Fantasy Empire Tuesdays at 11 Eastern. I will get the notifications. I'm in the middle of my day job, Dan. Look, I'm not in retirement mode. I'm nowhere close to that. But 11 o'clock, middle of the day, check it out. Fantasy Empire with some high stakes legends, along with our own high stake legend, Dan Williamson. I host Man vs. Machine with Ryan Reynolds on Wednesdays, 9 p.m. Eastern, and we give a preview about some of the trending players, some of the best fantasy advice, some players, some storylines from the season or the week that we are monitoring, and then we answer some start-sit questions too. And so that's, something that has been really valuable for, the people here at Player Profiler, because many will come to the channel and just ask, should I start Brandon Ayuk or should I have started Juwan Jennings last week? Well, we did have Brandon Ayuk ranked as the number one wide receiver for the week. We had Jennings probably 20 to 30 spots ahead of consensus. Obviously we got the wrong 49ers wide receiver as the number one wide receiver for last week, but it was a lot of fun to talk about that with Ryan, and the last one just dropped yesterday. So check out by yesterday, I mean, we're recording this Thursday, September 26th. The most recent episode of Man vs. Machine dropped Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, the 25th. All right, Ryan, we've delayed enough. We're 7 minutes in. Best ball winners through the first 3 weeks. I think the biggest winner in terms of value return positionally, we'll start with Saquon Barkley, right? And there's a lot of things that have gone right for Saquon. He started with a really strong 3-touchdown game against Green Bay. And then over the course of the next couple weeks, other pieces from this Philly offense have just kind of fallen apart. You saw AJ Brown with the hamstring injury, Devonta Smith with the concussion that we're expecting to keep him out for some time. So the offense is just going to run through Saquon Barkley, right? I anticipate Ryan Reynolds and I identified him as a hold, not someone that we're looking to sell high on or get a king's ransom for. We want to ride the wave with Saquon Barkley as long as we can.
Yeah, definitely. I think, Barkley, everything, as you noted, everything's kind of fallen his way. But the other thing that, he's passing the eye test again in a way that I don't think he was last year. I was a little bit hesitant to take too much Barkley, probably much to my detriment as we go through the season. But he looks like he's got more explosiveness. He looks like he's running with better vision. He's always had pretty good vision, I should say very good vision, but he looks like he's even taken it up a notch. So I'm liking what I'm seeing from him. The offense is using him very well, and Philadelphia up until now has had enough other weapons that, you can't just focus on Barkley either. And with Jalen Hurts, that also makes it really difficult to focus on Barkley. So I think I think this is one that's going to continue to probably be a league winner as long as he stays healthy. He'll come back to the pack. I'm sure the advance rate is going to drop as the season goes along from where it is now. But I think he's going to be a great pick.
Right now, Barkley on pace to set a career high in yards per carry. He already has 5 touchdowns on the season. The RB1 on the season so far. He's number 2 in snaps. He's getting almost all the opportunities in the backfield. There is not much Kenneth Gainwell. There's not much Will Shipley. Second in red zone touches, right? Second in carries. He's getting the volume. He's getting the touchdowns. All of it is great. The routes, he's running all the running back routes. This is exactly what we want to see out of the potential RB1 overall. So continue to ride the wave with Saquon. Definitely a smash play. Another early season winner is a player that, as a team here at Player Profile, we were very in on Blake Corum in terms of what his talent was, what he did at the University of Michigan, and landing spot. We thought that was a good landing spot. The Sean McVay offense, LA Rams, all of that. But very early in the season, Kyren Williams has a lockdown right now on this running back 1 position. You were able to get Kyren Williams in round 2, round 3, maybe even into round 4 for some of the drafts, Dan. And the narrative still could hold that Kyren, falls off in the second half. He's not built to last the whole season, et cetera, et cetera. But is this early season high flight performance from Kyren kind of what you were expecting, or were you expecting Blake Corum to get a little bit more involved?
Yeah, I was definitely expecting Corum to be more involved. It kind of sounded like that's what they wanted to draft him for, was somebody who could spell Kyren and keep him from getting run down over the course of the season. What we've seen is Kyren just be an absolute bell cow, and Ronnie Rivers getting the work over Corum. That's something that I would think and hope would change as the season goes along, that Corum kind of moves into that second role rather than be the third back who's really not getting any work whatsoever. Right now he's looking like shades of Zach Evans.
Yeah.
Which is not what we want to see. But Kyren Williams, I mean, wow. If you got Kyren, you certainly got a good price on him. I mean, for the most part, he was going in the third, fourth round in FFPCs, and underdog. I think he was going definitely in the fourth, right?
Yeah, he was. Kyren was going in the he hovered in the third.
Okay.
I don't think
Yeah.
he hovered, outside of the top 36 of picks. In drafters, you were able to get him maybe down to 40.
Okay.
But I don't think he dipped even lower than that.
Yep. And that's, and so you're getting a fantastic return on your investment there.
Yeah, for sure. For those tracking at home, Kyren Williams already 5 touchdowns on the season, the RB4 in fantasy points per game, but only 3.0 yards per carry. The advanced metrics are not in his favor, which is why you want to buy even lower on Blake Corum. Like, yeah, this is the way. Like, okay, dynasty wise, Jordan Mason or Blake Corum?
Yeah, dynasty wise, I think I'm still probably going Corum, because I think Mason is going to have Garindo to hold off long term. Plus, they definitely could add somebody else. As Christian McCaffrey's career winds down. I'm not trying to stick a fork in McCaffrey or anything here, but
Right.
it's for this year. Obviously, Mason is the pick, and if you're trying to win your league, I would trade Corum and get Mason and be very, very happy about it. But I don't think anybody's going to make that offer. So, Mason is in Dynasty hovering more kind of between the first and second round rookie pick for 2025.
I agree. We're going to see, what the running back room is going to eventually shake out. Like, you can't imagine Kyren Williams goes away eventually. Like, even if Blake Corum takes over, like, in the future, Kyren, like, is still going to be at worst a Theo Riddick type, like, not a primary guy, but he can catch passes out of the backfield. That's kind of how he's built. His player profiler comp right now is James White. So
Makes sense. Sorry, I got the landscaping guy going here.
All right, the next big winner versus ADP, Achane. Achane has been the steady rock of this Miami Dolphins offense. He's been getting all the targets out of the backfield. Raheem Mostert has been hurt for most of the beginning of the season. Jalen Wright really hasn't come along, but are gloomy days ahead for Achane, Dan, given that Tua is out indefinitely?
Yeah, I don't know how long Tua is going to be out. It definitely, I think, limits his ceiling a little bit more, but I think he's going to have a solid floor. I mean, to be honest, I didn't really see Achan as being any kind of a bell cow to the extent that he has been so far. Mostert getting hurt. I mean, it's right in the name, most hurt. Um, so, you should know what's going on there. But I really thought, hey, well, it's going to be Jeff Wilson or it's going to be Jalen Wright, just kind of seamlessly going in for Mostert. And I didn't think there would be much of a drop off. And, Achan's role would stay pretty much the same as it was. But that's obviously not what we've seen. And, for that reason, I was having a much easier time clicking Achane in Bestball than I was in managed leagues, just because of the fact that I felt like he might be a little bit more boom bust. But seems like he's got a decent floor underneath him now.
Yeah, his weighted opportunities number 2 among all running backs, 12th in opportunity share, 14th in snap share, but he leads all running backs in receiving yards and receptions and expected fantasy points per game. He's currently the running back 3. When we thought, okay, Achane last year only played 11 games, 800 rushing yards, only, not even 200 receiving yards, was the running back 5 in points per game, but he's somehow been better. So, I mean, we know the reasons, but
Yeah, when he gets split out as often as he has, that definitely helps out with the old receiving numbers.
yeah, I mean, the offseason narrative of, oh, he's not going to get all of his blah, blah, blah. He's not going to get his, or he's going to be split out wide, right? How much do we all believe that running backs get split out wide? Not very much. Like, there's not.
It's talked about 10 times as often as it actually happens. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but look, it happened. So there we go. Another big winner for the beginning of the season, wide receiver Nico Collins. There was, Dan, we spent so much time this offseason debating who is going to be the wide receiver 1 for Houston. Is it going to be Diggs? Is Dell going to take the next step? Is it still going to be Nico Collins? And the answer is, well, so far it's still Nico Collins right now. Collins is the wide receiver 8 in fantasy points per game, 19.3. That's not disappointing in the least. Still leading top 3 in deep targets, 5th in air yards, 1st in receiving yards. Like, he's putting up the numbers that indicate to us that he's still the alpha here. 17th among wide receivers in target share. He's earning targets and deep targets. This is the player that we wanted. And this is who I thought was going to be the wide receiver 1 for Houston. What is your reaction to Nico Collins being an early season winner?
My reaction is I, once again, have a lot of noise going on in the background. So, yeah, so I think Nico Collins definitely, is the alpha receiver in Houston and will probably stay that way. If you drafted Diggs, you're not too disappointed, but he's doing just fine for you as well. But Nico is definitely the big winner out of the 3, and Tank Dell is looking like he's probably the big loser to this point. Looks like he probably won't even play this week. And, to me, he doesn't look right after that tightrope surgery that he had last year. So it may be a little bit of a lost season for Dell. We'll see. Hopefully he's able to bring it back and, make his drafters happy. But right now I'm really happy with my Nico shares and darn happy with my Diggs shares.
Yeah, very, very happy with the Nico shares. I was extremely bullish on him coming into the season, and it's so far so good, worked out. And with Dell expected to be out for week 4, yes, this is going to be very nice for us when we're uh, getting that consolidated target share, Diggs and Collins for Houston. We'll move on to the wide receiver 1 in our hearts, player profilers' hearts. Number 2 in fantasy points per game, Malik Nabers, 3 touchdowns, 384 air yards, 271 receiving yards. Dan, you and I had the conversation in the offseason. If the market is so high on Malik Nabers, but so low on Daniel Jones, how can those two things coexist? And well, I mean, Jones hasn't been atrocious this year. He's had his moments where he's been not so good in week 1 against Minnesota, but maybe that's more of an attribution to how difficult Minnesota's defense is, right now. Whereas Jones over the last 2 weeks, quarterback 6 on the week, quarterback 11 on the week. So, yeah, we'll see. He's been hyper targeting Malik Nabers, and that's been getting fantasy points. Can't really argue with that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Now we have to see how defenses are going to adjust to that because, they're not going to let this continue to go on totally unopposed. They're going to try to find ways to slow it down. And that's where we find out how good Daniel Jones is if he can still continue to support Malik Nabers, when the offenses or the defenses are trying to take him away. So, it's definitely wheels up for Nabers right now. He's done, this has been like the perfect run out for him so far over the first 3 weeks. And it's great to see, the talent is totally obvious. And it's, he honestly looks like he's probably, to me, going to end up being a better pro than Marvin Harrison Jr. I know it's very early, but that's kind of where my head is at right now because he just does more things well.
Nabers right now, number 2 among all receivers in target share, and he has a 38.5% red zone target share. That's that. It's not just that he's earning targets; he's also earning targets in the red zone.
Yeah, and where you want.
But it's not just the red zone. He's also earning deep targets. He's number 1 among all receivers in deep targets as well. So he's getting them in the money zones, in the end zone. He's getting them down the field. He is the big play. We're recording this on Thursday Night Football while this is happening. First play of the game for Malik Nabers to be involved, a catch for 39 yards. Yep, he's going to have these big chunk plays. That's what we're looking at. The deep targets, the touchdowns. He leads all receivers in receiving touchdowns. And Daniel Jones is trying to air it out to him. He's number 3 in unrealized air yards. There's still meat on the bone from Malik Nabers, believe it or not. Imagine if they had a good quarterback.
Exactly. Yeah, you can cue up the Dr. Seuss book, Green Eggs and Ham. He will eat those targets anywhere. So,
well, we've had some murkiness for Green Bay. Jayden Reed certainly played well, really strong out of the gate in week 1. The passing game's been kind of nerfed in weeks 2 and 3 with Jordan Love out, but Jayden Reed's still among the top receivers in fantasy points this year because of his big week 1. I don't know if he's going to sustain top 10, but like top 15 wide receiver as a floor feels right for Jayden Reed and paying off his ADP.
Yeah, he's he's very good. I think as the season goes along, we've got to see because there are a lot of different receivers here that are very good in Green Bay. But the thing that Jayden Reed has going for him is they use him a lot on basically design touches, so
Yes.
they're manufacturing the touches for him, and he's really really fast. I don't know if you knew that, Bradley, but he's very fast. So yeah, he's somebody who can do a lot with the ball in his hands. I kind of think of him as kind of Green Bay's version of Deebo Samuel. Deebo Light, if you will.
I like that. Yeah.
He might not be Deebo Light for long. He might just be Deebo pretty soon.
Yeah, I don't know if they want to run him as much as they'll run Debo, but the speed, the strength, um, he looks like a bigger Xavier Worthy from the speed. Like he ran almost the exact same play from Thursday night to open the season to that Friday game where we saw Jayden Reed go off against the Eagles. We got clarity, Dan, in Kansas City. It's Rashee Rice season. He wasn't suspended this year. Travis Kelce is on his way down. We'll talk about Kelce in a little bit, but this is Rashee Rice's world, and we're just living in it, right?
Yeah, it really is. I was very surprised. I really thought that he might end up on the commissioner's exempt list or something like that, but they're letting him play. So, and he's doing all the things. I was also concerned with Hollywood and Xavier Worthy and Travis Kelce and all of that. Even if they did let him play, would his role be the same? But his role has been as good or better than it was at the end of last year. So this is everything is going as well as it possibly could for Rashee Rice right now. So kudos to him and kudos to those who drafted him late during the early parts of the summer.
Yeah, right now, Rashee Rice, the wide receiver 3 in fantasy points per game, wide receiver 5 in target share, wide receiver 3 in target rate. Number 1, and this was a common thing from last year as well, Dan, number 1 in yards after the catch. This is he's getting all of the Kelce targets. Kelce is taking his steps back, and so those targets that are not going to Kelce are now being given to the more dynamic Rashee Rice. Jayden Daniels, I think, is a big time winner. He was a player that both you and I were big on drafting at a value coming into the 2024 season. The Heisman Trophy winner, second overall pick from this past season, is right now the quarterback 2 in fantasy points per game, 23.2, 171 rushing yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns through 3 games. Yeah, this is like Lamar Jackson before they pulled the brakes on him.
Yeah, except he might even be a better passer than Lamar Jackson. He's definitely a better passer than Anthony Richardson. So, and that was kind of the easy call for me was, just fade Anthony Richardson and draft Jayden Daniels a couple rounds later instead.
Right.
So I ended up with very little A-Rich and lots of Jayden Daniels. Loving that pick so far. He's RG3 on steroids in a lot of ways.
It is a great quarterback pick. You want to always be looking for these types of players that what is the hidden upside? And like we were looking at the floor, I was projecting like quarterback 8, quarterback 10 is the floor for Jayden Daniels, which meant that the ceiling, you could get into a very, very interesting ceiling with rushing. And the weapons that are around Jayden Daniels with Terry McLaurin and, well, just Terry McLaurin for right now.
Yeah, we don't need to go any further. We probably shouldn't. But the thing is, too, I mean, Daniels really hasn't been running that much. He's been running when he needs to.
Yes.
And
mostly in the red zone, end zone area,
Right, exactly. And that's served him well. So, everything's working out very well. You just hope that, Kingsbury continues to bring him along as he has, and he continues to just develop because he looks like he could be special.
Yes. So we will continue with a few more of the winners. J.K. Dobbins, running back for the Chargers. There were a lot of narratives that just made sense for J.K. Dobbins, right? Or at least like the concept of J.K. Dobbins, maybe not him individually, but we knew what the Chargers were about. They were going to run the stinking ball, and Jim Harbaugh was going to not only run the ball effectively and do it at a high volume. So fading Justin Herbert was the smart move this offseason, putting in whether it was Gus Edwards or J.K. Dobbins or Kimani Vidal, right? We wanted to be targeting the Chargers running backs, but J.K. Dobbins, second round draft capital and a 99th percentile 40-yard dash, despite the injuries, that was the profile of the player that had the most upside, most juice left to give, Dan. And right now, 7.4 yards per carry, 17.1 fantasy points per game. Even if he's not a super big factor in the passing game, J.K. Dobbins still a very solid running back too for us moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to me, Gus Edwards not doing anything was pretty much the expectation. He just does not have, he's got no juice. We'll just put it that way. And Dobbins, kudos to him. I really did not think there was any way possible that anybody who'd been through the horrific lower body injuries that he's been through, with the knees and the Achilles and everything else. It's amazing to me what he's doing, and it's fantastic. I have hardly any, and I'm his biggest fan because I think it's so fantastic. I've got lots of Kamani Vidal waiting in the wings, but
just in case
does happen, I think that might be the way things go. It's probably either going to be him or Hassan Haskins. This is Jim Harbaugh after all, so we have to assume that Haskins is going to get a shot here. But it's great for Dobbins, and I hope it keeps going for him all year long.
We hope so. It would be a great story coming back from multiple injuries.
Oh, he would definitely be the comeback player of the year. No question about it.
No question. And then the last big winner versus ADP that I wanted to mention today, Quentin Johnston. Dan, he's still not good at football, but he's catching touchdowns for the Chargers, and he's looking, like the player that if you drafted him in Dynasty, that was good.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I mean, can you smell that? That's touchdown deodorant right
there. Phenomenal.
That's what Quentin Johnston has.
The move here is to sell Quentin Johnston to
please.
anyone who was not paying attention.
Get out there and sell.
But we're going to talk just briefly. We'll breeze through the losers here because most of them are injury based. That's just the reality of, especially the beginning of the season. If they're out, they're hurting your best ball teams pretty significantly. Christian McCaffrey obviously hasn't played. Jordan Mason has stepped in. Mason was not drafted in some leagues. Like, he was left undrafted in some places. Remember, it wasn't until near the end of the season, end of the offseason, where Eli Mitchell was placed on the injured reserve for the season. So that's something to keep in mind is for right now, the CMC teams are probably they're in a lot of trouble, and it looks like he's going to be out for a while.
Yeah, they definitely are. And, honestly, up until at least August 1st, if Jordan Mason he was a little bit too galaxy brained to really expect to be, drafting him very.
All right, another player that has disappointed, not due to his own injury, Dan, but Tua Tagovailoa's injury has really hampered Tyreek Hill over the last couple of games. Hill is on the wrong side of the age cliff. Certainly that's something we're keeping in mind, but he's still a speed demon, so you can't not play Tyreek Hill because of the one or two big plays he could still have regardless of who's getting him the ball. But it's a problem that we need to be paying attention to, that he's not the set it, forget it wide receiver one, that we drafted him to be, given to his injury.
It hasn't been great, but hopefully we get Tua back pretty soon.
I hope so. Well, speaking of some injuries, we'll continue to talk about A.J. Brown, hamstring injury. Puka Nacua, injury, right? Jaylen Warren, hamstring injury. Those have all been mostly injury-based. Mark Andrews as well, still coming back from his tightrope injury. So just maybe a couple players that then will round it out. Jahmyr Gibbs was a player that is silently disappointed a little bit. He hasn't had the boom games. He's been a nice floor play, but the ceiling hasn't been there, and he was being drafted as a 1-2 turn player, Dan. So you're not playing Jahmyr Gibbs. He's just been below what you drafted him to be. Any takeaways about Gibbs?
Yeah, I think this is always the fear with Gibbs, is that this could be the case. He's really splitting the work with David Montgomery. I think drafters went into it with the idea that Gibbs was going to take a step up and Montgomery would take a step back, and we just haven't seen that. So as long as Montgomery's healthy, it does not look good for Gibbs's future.
And the last player that I want to mention on tonight's show, Zamir White. Well, no, two players. We need two more. I couldn't not mention DeAndre Swift, because DeAndre Swift, arguably the worst running back in terms of all qualifying measures in the NFL right now. So DeAndre Swift, yikes.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I mean, and he's being put into a role that, he's not good at. He needs a good offensive line. He needs to be getting the ball in space. You give him some room to create, and he can create. If you ask him to try to wiggle through small creases and, just pound right up into the right hole and be decisive, that's not who he is. And the way that the Chicago offense is actually working out is the worst possible fit for Swift. The offensive line has not been good. The play calling has not been creative. So they probably need to move on to either Roschon or Khalil Herbert, who's going to fit the misfit, or the crappy situation a little bit better.
Yeah, I think Khalil Herbert is the answer to who's the best running back for this team, the Chicago Bears team. Not because I have a ton of shares of Khalil Herbert just waiting in the wings. No. Couldn't be that. No. The last is Zamir White, right? We got panic mode week 1 because of the Alexander Madison touches, but I think that's how it's going to be moving forward. A 40-60, 50-50, 55-45 split both ways. That's how it could turn out. There's not a lot of confidence that Zamir White is going to be the premier ball carrier moving forward.
Based on productivity with Alexander Madison is the most damning possible thing that could happen to any running back, because Alexander Madison, I've seen him in Minnesota. He is juiceless. He is like a dried husk of a running back. He's terrible. I would be hard pressed to find a running back that has less to offer than Alexander Madison. And somehow Zamir White has managed to say, yeah, it's like the limbo. I can go lower than that.
We can't go lower than, well, okay, DeAndre Swift. We can go lower to DeAndre Swift. But other than that, we've seen some pretty big losers for our best ball portfolios. All right, guys, make sure you're following Dan Williamson on the X Machine at Overhyped Sleeper with no E at the end. I'm Bradley Stalder at FF Stalder on the X. Make sure you're checking out Stack Hunters. The podcast version will be up shortly. And check out both of our shows, Fantasy Empire and Man vs. Machine, during the season. Then Stack Hunters will resume full-time in the offseason. Until next time, good luck in the best ball streets, everybody.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.